December 8, 1933. Smyrna, Turkey. The morning air carried the sharp scent of Mediterranean salt mixed with gunpowder smoke from the bird hunters scattered across the hillside. 27-year-old Virginia Hall, an American consular clerk stationed at the United States Consulate, climbed over a wire fence during what should have been a routine snipe hunting expedition with friends. Her 12-gauge shotgun snagged. The weapon discharged. The blast tore through her left foot, mangling bone and tissue beyond any hope of repair. Within hours, as gangrene spread through the shattered limb like black poison, Turkish doctors delivered their verdict: amputation below the knee or death. Virginia Hall, who had never led men in combat, never received military training, and never imagined she would become a spy, made a choice in that hospital bed that would terrify Nazi Germany more than any army division. She named her new wooden leg Cuthbert and decided her life had just begun. What the Gestapo didn't know, what Klaus Barbie himself would never discover despite flooding France with 500 agents to hunt her, was that the wooden leg they mocked would become their greatest blind spot. The limping lady they desperately sought would organize prison breaks, command 1,500 resistance fighters, and transmit intelligence that would help win World War II, all while standing on a prosthetic that weighed 7 pounds and turned her stump into a bloody mess with every step. By 1941, Nazi Germany controlled most of Western Europe. France had fallen in just 6 weeks. The Gestapo, with its network of informants and torture chambers, had crushed resistance networks across occupied territory with brutal efficiency. In Lyon, the heart of what remained of unoccupied Vichy France, German and French secret police monitored every foreigner, every suspicious movement, every whisper of dissent. British intelligence desperately needed agents on the ground in France, people who could organize resistance, gather intelligence on German troop movements, and help downed Allied pilots escape. But survival rates were catastrophic. Of the female agents, Britain's Special Operations Executive would eventually send to France. 40% would die in concentration camps or before German firing squads. Of all SOE agents sent to France, approximately 25% would not return. The mathematics were brutal, and the consensus among military strategists was clear. Agents needed to be invisible, to blend seamlessly into French society, to move without drawing attention. A limping American woman with a pronounced accent and reddish hair would last perhaps 3 days before the Gestapo identified and captured her. Britain had tried conventional approaches with devastating results. First attempt, they sent Capitaine Michel Brault, a French native with impeccable credentials, into Marseille in May 1941 to establish an intelligence network. Within 3 weeks, the Vichy police arrested him based on an informant's tip. Cost: 1 experienced agent, 6 months of training, and the exposure of 3 safe houses. Second attempt, the SOE established the Autogiro network in northern France, with elaborate security protocols including dead drops, rotating meeting locations, and strict need-to-know compartmentalization. The Gestapo infiltrated it within 4 months by capturing a courier and torturing him for 36 hours until he revealed contact procedures. Cost: 17 agents arrested, 12 eventually executed, and the complete destruction of what had taken 8 months to build. Third attempt, SOE sent a team of 3 British commandos with perfect forged documentation to sabotage the Peugeot factory producing tank components for Germany. French collaborators recognized them as foreigners within days based on subtle differences in behavior, how they ordered coffee, how they greeted shopkeepers. All 3 were arrested before reaching their target. Cost: 3 dead soldiers and a strategic objective unaccomplished. In October 1941, 12 SOE agents and French resistance organizers gathered for what they believed was a secure coordination meeting. Someone had betrayed them. The Gestapo raided it. All 12 were arrested, interrogated, and transferred to German custody. According to declassified SOE files, this single raid destroyed months of careful network building and left British intelligence with virtually no operational capacity in central France. The numbers were damning. Between May and November 1941, SOE lost approximately 30 agents in France to arrest, execution, or forced withdrawal. Cost in pounds sterling. Over 75,000 in training, equipment, and lost operations. Cost in human terms. Families destroyed. Intelligence networks obliterated. French resistance members who trusted the British now facing firing squads. Winston Churchill's war cabinet had forbidden women from frontline operations. Military doctrine held that women lacked the physical stamina for field work, the emotional control for crisis situations, and the authority to lead men in dangerous operations. When the Special Operations Executive suggested sending Virginia Hall, an American civilian with a wooden leg, to France in 1941, critics within the organization questioned whether she would survive her first week. Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris stated the position bluntly in a classified memorandum dated June 1941. A woman cannot maintain operational security under the stress of enemy territory. The proposal to send a disabled American civilian into France is, in my professional opinion, a waste of training resources and likely to result in yet another captured agent revealing network details under interrogation. Colonel Maurice Buckmaster, who would become head of SOE's F section, initially shared these concerns. In a memo to SOE leadership, he wrote, "Miss Hall's physical limitation presents an obvious identification risk. Any competent Gestapo agent will mark a limping foreigner immediately." But every man they had sent was dead or captured. Britain had run out of safe options. Before the accident that took her leg, Virginia Hall had dreamed only of becoming an American diplomat. She excelled at languages: French, German, Italian, Russian, Spanish, all absorbed during her education at Radcliffe, Barnard, and universities in Paris and Vienna. In 1931, she joined the State Department as a clerk at the United States Embassy in Warsaw, earning $2,000 annually. She transferred to Smyrna in 1933, hoping each posting would bring her closer to her goal, a position as a Foreign Service officer, perhaps even an ambassadorship. At the time, only 6 of the 1,500 American diplomats were women. There were no female ambassadors, but Virginia believed competence would overcome prejudice. The hunting accident shattered more than her leg. After recovering in Baltimore and learning to walk with a 7-pound prosthetic leg made of wood and aluminum, she applied again to the Foreign Service in 1937. The State Department's response arrived in a formal letter. Amputation of a limb, except fingers or toes, is cause for rejection. An obscure regulation, buried in bureaucratic language, ended her diplomatic dreams. She appealed directly to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. No response came. She resigned from the State Department in March 1939, still a consular clerk after 8 years of service. When Germany invaded Poland that September, Virginia was in France. She watched as the country she loved mobilized for war. In February 1940, she volunteered as an ambulance driver for the French 9th Artillery Regiment, driving wounded soldiers from the front lines near Metz to hospitals in Paris. The work was brutal. 12-hour shifts navigating shattered roads while German bombers screamed overhead. Her wooden leg ached constantly. She noticed something during those months. Soldiers treated her differently because she was American, because she was a woman. They underestimated her. They shared information around her as if she were invisible. She began to understand that her apparent weaknesses might be transformed into operational advantages. When France fell in June 1940, Virginia evacuated to Spain, then made her way to London. She took a job as a secretary for the military attaché at the American Embassy. In February 1941, a man named George Bellows, a British intelligence officer she had met by chance in Spain, contacted her. He worked for a new organization called the Special Operations Executive, created by Churchill with the mandate to set Europe ablaze through sabotage and subversion. Bellows saw something in Virginia that others had missed. He recruited her. The SOE trained her in weapons, communications, security protocols, and resistance organization. She learned to encode messages, to detect surveillance, to kill silently if necessary. In August 1941, they gave her a mission that conventional wisdom said was impossible. Enter unoccupied Vichy France, establish a network of resistance fighters, gather intelligence on German operations, and help Allied soldiers escape to Spain. Her cover would be a correspondent for the New York Post. Her code name, Agent 3844, her annual salary, £500. Her expected survival time, unknown but probably brief. She was the second female agent the SOE sent to France. The first had been evacuated after just weeks. Virginia arrived in Vichy, France in August 1941. She based herself in Lyon, a grey industrial city on the Rhône that had become the nerve centre of French resistance. She rented a small apartment, secured her cover credentials, and began the dangerous work of identifying who could be trusted. Her first recruit was unexpected. She befriended nuns at a local convent who agreed to shelter agents and hide radio equipment. Her second was more audacious. She approached Germaine Guérin, who owned the city's most successful brothel. Guérin's employees served German officers who drank too much and spoke too freely. The intelligence Virginia gathered from these conversations, troop movements, supply routes, fortification locations, was transmitted via coded messages through the American consulate's diplomatic pouch to London. Within months, Virginia's network, codenamed Heckler, grew to approximately 90 agents operating across southern France. She arranged parachute drops of weapons and supplies. She established safe houses where downed British pilots could hide. She created escape routes into Spain. Allied airmen shot down over France received instructions. Go to Laon, find the American consulate, ask for Olivier. Olivier was Virginia. She personally coordinated the escape of dozens of pilots, working with Guérin and others to move them from safe house to safe house, forging papers, bribing officials, guiding them over the Pyrenees when the route was clear. SOE records indicate that in her first year, Virginia handled more operational activity than any other agent in France. The French began calling her La Dame qui boite, the lady who limps. The Germans, who knew someone was organizing resistance in Lyon but couldn't identify them, circulated descriptions of the Limping Lady and placed her on their most wanted list. The disaster came in October 1941. 12 SOE agents and French resistance leaders gathered for a coordination meeting. Someone had betrayed them. The Gestapo raided the meeting and arrested everyone. Virginia was the only SOE agent in the region still at liberty, the only one with a siège, functioning radio capable of communicating with London. The captured agents were transported to Périgueux prison, then transferred to the Mozac internment camp near Bergerac. Among them was Georges Béguet, one of the SOE's most skilled wireless operators, and several men who would become legendary resistance leaders if they survived. SOE headquarters in London wrote them off as lost. The Gestapo was known for its interrogation methods. Even the strongest agents rarely lasted more than 48 hours before revealing network details under torture. Virginia refused to accept their capture as final. For months, while continuing all her other operations, coordinating sabotage, organizing airdrops, managing the escape lines, she worked on a plan to free the prisoners. She recruited Gabi Bloch, the wife of one of the captured agents, to visit the camp. Gabi smuggled messages and tools hidden inside tins of sardines. Inside the camp, the prisoners received the tools and began planning. Virginia arranged everything they would need on the outside: safe houses, transport, false French police uniforms for the escorts, money, forged documents for the journey to Spain. The most audacious part of the plan involved a 70-year-old French priest, a World War I veteran who had lost both legs in combat and used a wheelchair. During one of his pastoral visits to Morzak, the guards allowed him into the prisoners' barracks. Once inside, with sentries posted at windows, he asked the prisoners to look under his cassock. There, strapped to his torso, was a radio transmitter. Bege reportedly exclaimed, "Great Scott, it's a piano." The priest replied, "Yes, I was given to understand that you can get plenty of music out of it. It has been nicely tuned, hide it, and of course forget how it got here." From inside Morzak prison, Bege began transmitting to London, coordinating the escape with Virginia's network. They planned for the new moon period between July 8th and July 15th, 1942, when darkness would provide maximum cover. On July 15, 1942, at approximately 2 a.m., 12 men slipped under the prison fences and barbed wire in just 12 minutes. They disappeared into the woods surrounding Morzak. The Germans launched an immediate and intense manhunt. For 2 weeks, the escaped prisoners hid in safe houses Virginia had arranged, supplied with food and civilian clothes. Virginia's contacts spread rumors that the men had been extracted by RAF bombers and were already back in England. After 14 days, her informants reported that German and French police had called off the active search, believing the escapees had indeed left France. The prisoners carefully made their way to Lyon by truck and train, traveling separately to avoid drawing attention. Virginia housed them in different locations, then organized their movement into Spain. All 12 eventually reached London. Several would parachute back into France months later to lead SOE networks of their own. M.R.D. Foote, the official SOE historian, later described the Morzak escape as one of the war's most useful operations of its kind. The Germans were furious. The Abwehr and Gestapo flooded Vichy France with 500 additional agents, most concentrated in Lyon. The focus of their investigation was clear: find whoever organized the escape. Klaus Barbie, the Gestapo chief in Lyon, a man who would later be convicted of war crimes for personally torturing and executing thousands, took personal charge of the hunt. The Germans intensified their surveillance, their interrogations, their infiltration attempts. Virginia's police contacts, who had previously protected her through tip-offs and deliberate incompetence, could no longer be relied upon. The pressure was too great. The Gestapo was closing in on the Limping Lady they still couldn't identify. In August 1942, a man appeared at one of Virginia's contacts claiming to be an agent from the Gloria Resistance Network in Paris. His name was Robert Alesh, and he presented himself as a Catholic priest with valuable intelligence. Virginia's instincts warned her something was wrong. Within weeks, news arrived that the Gloria network had been infiltrated and destroyed. Alesh, it turned out, was an Abwehr agent. He would later be convicted of betraying dozens of agents and resistance fighters. Virginia realized the net was tightening. On November 7, 1942, the American consulate in Lyon informed her that an Allied invasion of North Africa was imminent and that the Germans would likely retaliate by occupying all of France, including the supposedly unoccupied Vichy zone. Virginia understood what this meant. The Gestapo would intensify operations beyond anything previously seen. On November 8, the Germans moved to occupy Vichy France. Virginia left Lyon immediately, telling no one, not even her closest contacts like Guérin or Jean Rousset. a local doctor who had established an asylum for the mentally ill that served as a cover for hiding agents and escaped prisoners. She took a train from Lyon to Perpignan, traveling south toward the Spanish border. There, she met a guide who would lead her over the Pyrenees. The guide was extremely reluctant to take a woman on such a dangerous journey, especially in winter. He didn't know about Cuthbert. The crossing required walking approximately 50 miles over 2 to 3 days through snow, ascending a 7,500-foot pass. For a person with 2 legs and proper mountaineering experience, the route was exhausting. For Virginia, with a 7-pound wooden leg that couldn't bend at the ankle, it was nearly impossible. She had to climb the mountain sideways because her prosthetic couldn't flex. Every step drove the wooden socket deeper into her stump. The leather straps that held Cuthbert in place chafed until her skin broke open and bled. Before leaving Lyon, Virginia had sent a message to SOE headquarters. "Cuthbert is being tiresome, but I can cope." SOE, not understanding that Cuthbert was her prosthetic leg, replied, "If Cuthbert is tiresome, eliminate him." Virginia made the crossing. Author Craig Gralley, a marathon runner, later attempted to walk part of Virginia's escape route in good weather. He described it as one of the most physically demanding experiences of his life. Virginia did it in winter, in heavy snow, with one leg. When she arrived in Spain, she was arrested for illegally crossing the border. The American embassy secured her release. She made her way to London. When Virginia reached SOE headquarters in London, Maurice Buckmaster, the head of F Section, delivered crushing news. He would not send her back to France. She was too compromised. Every Gestapo agent in Lyon knew about the Limping Lady. Wanted posters circulated with composite sketches. Barbie had reportedly said, "I would give anything to get my hands on that limping Canadian bitch." The Nazis mistakenly believed she was Canadian, but they would recognize her immediately if she returned. Virginia was devastated. She had found her purpose. She was exceptional at work that others couldn't do. Being benched felt like the State Department rejection all over again. Being told she wasn't fit for the work she knew she could perform better than almost anyone. But in 1943, a new opportunity emerged. The Americans were finally ramping up their own intelligence service, the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, run by General William Wild Bill Donovan. The OSS was small, inexperienced, and desperate for capable agents who knew France. They needed Virginia. In March 1944, the OSS prepared to send her back into occupied France. This time, the stakes were even higher. The Germans now controlled all of France. The Allied invasion of Normandy was being planned for June. The success of D-Day would depend partly on whether resistance forces could disrupt German communications, destroy bridges and rail lines, and prevent reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Virginia would help prepare the battlefield. But first, she needed to become someone the Gestapo couldn't recognize. She underwent an extraordinary transformation. A London makeup artist taught her how to draw realistic wrinkles on her face. A dentist ground down her white American teeth so they resembled those of a French peasant. She dyed her grey. She practiced shuffling with an old woman's gait that disguised her limp. She adopted the identity of an elderly milkmaid. Because her wooden leg prevented her from parachuting, the OSS landed her by British motor torpedo boat on the coast of Brittany. She arrived in France on March 1944 with Henri Lassault, a 62-year-old Frenchman designated as the official leader of their network, because the OSS, like the SOE before it, still found it too radical to place a woman in official command. Lassault carried 1 million francs. Virginia had 500,000 francs. They were the 4th and 5th OSS agents to arrive in France. Within days, Virginia separated herself from Lassault, whom she characterized as too talkative and a security risk. She instructed her contacts not to tell him where she was. Aware that her accent would betray her as American, she engaged a Frenchwoman named Madame Rabu to accompany her and speak for her when necessary. From March to July 1944, Virginia roamed France south of Paris, posing as an elderly milkmaid. On one occasion, she sold cheese she had made to a group of German soldiers. They bought it, thanked the old woman politely, and never suspected they were purchasing dairy products from the most wanted Allied spy in France. Virginia's work during these months was extraordinary in its scope and audacity. She scouted locations for parachute drops of weapons and supplies. She identified targets for sabotage, bridges, railway lines, communication towers. She transmitted intelligence reports on German troop positions, fortifications, and movements. She recruited and organized resistance fighters, building networks that would strike when the invasion came. Between May 1st and June 27, 1944, a period of just 57 days, Virginia transmitted 37 separate intelligence reports to OSS headquarters in London. Each report contained actionable military intelligence, German troop strengths, positions of artillery batteries, locations of ammunition depots, railway movements indicating unit deployments, fortification construction that would affect Allied advance routes. Report number 14, transmitted May 18, 1944, provided detailed information on German defensive positions along the Loire River, intelligence that shaped planning for post-invasion operations. Report number 29, sent June 11th, 5 days after D-Day, gave precise coordinates for German reinforcement columns moving toward Normandy, enabling Allied aircraft to interdict them. She supervised 27 parachute drops of supplies, containers filled with weapons, ammunition, explosives, and money. Each drop required days of preparation, identifying a suitable field, securing the location, arranging for reception teams, coordinating with London on the date and time, preparing signal fires to guide the aircraft, distributing the supplies after they landed, and hiding any evidence before German patrols arrived at dawn. On the night of May 23, 1944, 3 Halifax bombers dropped 47 containers near a field Virginia had scouted. The containers held 93 Steen submachine guns, 12 Bren light machine guns, 67 pistols, 240 grenades, 8,400 rounds of ammunition, and 500,000 francs in cash. Virginia's reception team collected everything within 90 minutes and distributed the weapons to Maquis units across 3 departments. 1 week later, those weapons were used in ambushes that killed 23 German soldiers and destroyed 2 supply trucks. She coordinated the activities of approximately 1,500 Maquis resistance fighters scattered across central France. These weren't professional soldiers. They were farmers, shopkeepers, mechanics, students, French men and women who had chosen to resist but lacked training, equipment, and coordination. Virginia provided all 3. She organized them into functional units, taught them basic tactics, supplied them with weapons and explosives, and assigned them targets that supported Allied strategic objectives. The numbers tell the story of her operational tempo. 37 reports in 57 days means she was gathering, encoding, and transmitting critical intelligence every 1.5 days on average. Each transmission carried enormous risk. German direction-finding equipment could locate radio signals within 30 minutes of continuous transmission, and the Gestapo had mobile units equipped with detection gear hunting transmitters throughout occupied France. Virginia constantly moved her broadcasting locations, setting up in barns, abandoned buildings, even once in a church steeple, anywhere she could operate for 10 to 15 minutes before packing her equipment and moving to a new location kilometers away. Before we continue with the crucial moment when Virginia faced her greatest challenge in commanding the Maquis, I need to ask you something important. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Virginia Hall's incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We bring you these untold stories of remarkable people who changed history through courage and ingenuity. Your support helps us keep researching and producing these detailed narratives. Now, let's see what happened when Virginia confronted the reality of leading 3 battalions of French resistance fighters who didn't want to take orders from an American woman. In July 1944, she was ordered to Haute-Loire Department in south-central France, arriving on July 14th, Bastille Day, France's independence celebration. She established her headquarters in a barn near Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, a village that had become famous for hiding Jewish refugees. There, she abandoned her elderly milkmaid disguise and began openly organizing 3 battalions of Maquis fighters for Operation Dragoon, the Allied invasion of southern France, scheduled for August 15th. She immediately encountered a problem she hadn't fully faced before. As a woman holding the rank of second lieutenant, she struggled to assert authority over the self-proclaimed colonels leading various Maquis groups. These were men who had been fighting the Germans for years, who commanded fighters fiercely loyal to them, personally, who resented taking orders from anyone, especially an American woman they'd never met. One commander, a former French army captain who called himself Colonel Remy, stated his position clearly in their first meeting. "Madame, I appreciate the supplies you bring, but my men follow me, not orders from London transmitted through a secretary." He meant it as dismissal. Virginia recognized what he represented, the fundamental barrier that had existed throughout her adult life, the assumption that women couldn't lead in combat. But she was standing in occupied France, coordinating the equivalent of a full regiment, and she had neither time nor patience for ego battles. Virginia complained to OSS headquarters in a message that captured her frustration. "You send people out ostensibly to work with me and for me, but you do not give me the necessary authority." The response from OSS was bureaucratic and unhelpful. Maintain existing command relationships. Work through persuasion rather than direct orders. Virginia found a practical solution that bypassed the problem entirely. She controlled the money and weapons. She informed the Maquis leaders in a meeting on July 18th that she would finance their operations and supply them with arms on one condition: they would accept her tactical guidance. When Colonel Remy objected, Virginia pointed out that the British bombers arriving with supplies answered to her radio transmissions, not his demands. The supplies would go to groups that coordinated with Allied objectives. Remy could participate or watch his rivals become better armed. It was a hardball negotiation conducted in a barn in occupied France, with German patrols searching the roads outside. In late July, 3 aircraft arrived with supplies Virginia had requested. The containers held enough weapons to arm 300 fighters and enough explosives to destroy a dozen bridges. Virginia personally supervised the distribution, allocating resources based on which units had demonstrated discipline and which targets they could effectively strike. Remy received weapons for his men. So did 2 other Maquis leaders who had initially resisted her authority. Within days, seeing the resources she could provide, they gave their grudging acquiescence. From July 21st to September 12th, 1944, Virginia coordinated strikes across the Haute-Loire region. On July 28th, Maquis fighters destroyed the railway bridge at Pont de Chamalières, using plastic explosives from Virginia's supply drop. The bridge collapse forced German forces to detour 45 kilometers, adding 8 hours to any troop movements in the region. On August 2nd, resistance fighters ambushed a German convoy on the road between Le Puy and Saint-Étienne, killing 11 soldiers and capturing 2 trucks loaded with ammunition. On August 8th, they cut telephone lines at 17 locations simultaneously, disrupting German communications for 36 hours. On August 11th, they sabotaged a fuel depot outside Le Puy, destroying approximately 8,000 liters of gasoline. The operational tempo increased as August progressed. Between August 14th and August 20th, the week surrounding Operation Dragoon, Virginia's coordinated network conducted 31 separate attacks, 9 bridge demolitions, 12 road ambushes, 7 telephone line cuts, 2 railway sabotage operations, and 1 assault on a German command post. Each operation was timed to maximize disruption of German defensive preparations. The intelligence Virginia gathered during this period proved critical. On August 17th, she transmitted a report detailing the German 11th Panzer Division's positions and movement orders. Allied commanders used this intelligence to redirect naval bombardment, catching German armor in an exposed position and destroying 23 tanks. On August 19th, her report on German defensive positions along the Rhone Valley enabled Allied forces advancing from the south to avoid heavily fortified areas and exploit gaps in German lines. The resistance attacks were so effective that when American forces finally advanced into the region in early September 1944, they found the Haute-Loire department largely cleared of German troops. Local French government officials, who had collaborated with the Germans under Vichy, had already been arrested or fled. The Maquis, organized and supplied through Virginia's network, had effectively liberated their own territory. Virginia's fighters freed Le Chambon-sur-Lignon on August 20th. They freed Le Puy-en-Velay on August 23rd. By September 3rd, they controlled the entire department. One of the 3 battalions Virginia coordinated launched a raid on German headquarters in Le Puy on August 24th, achieving a stunning victory that freed the local administration and captured valuable intelligence documents detailing German retreat plans. American troops entering the region on September 11th found French tricolor flags already flying over liberated towns. A United States Army lieutenant colonel, arriving in Le Puy on September 12th, asked local resistance leaders who had organized and armed their forces. The answer came back: an American woman who had been living as a milkmaid. The officer initially didn't believe it. When resistance fighters showed him the barn where Virginia had operated her radio and stored weapons. When they described the supply drops she had coordinated and the tactical guidance she had provided, he wrote in his after-action report, "The guerrilla campaign in this sector was organized and directed by a female OSS agent with exceptional operational capability. The enemy has been cleared from the region with minimal Allied casualties and maximum disruption of enemy retreat routes." The strategic impact was significant. German forces that might have reinforced positions in Normandy or slowed the Allied advance from the south were instead tied down fighting resistance forces across central France, or fled altogether to avoid encirclement. The intelligence Virginia transmitted helped Allied commanders understand German dispositions and plan their operations. The bridges she helped destroy forced German columns to take longer routes, buying crucial time for Allied advances. The telephone lines her networks cut prevented German units from coordinating their defense. The ammunition dumps they destroyed left German forces undersupplied at critical moments. According to post-war analysis by the United States Army's Historical Division, published in 1946, the work of OSS agents like Virginia, combined with the resistance forces they organized, was equivalent to approximately 6 divisions of conventional troops, roughly 90,000 soldiers, in terms of operational impact on German capabilities in France. The analysis calculated that resistance operations delayed German reinforcement to Normandy by an average of 2 days per division, tied down an estimated 20,000 German troops in anti-partisan operations, who would otherwise have been available for frontline combat, and destroyed infrastructure worth approximately $50 million in 1940s currency. Yet even as Virginia achieved operational success, unprecedented for any agent in France, recognition remained elusive. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the war in Europe ended. President Harry S. Truman wanted to present Virginia with the Distinguished Service Cross in a public White House ceremony. The DSC is the second highest military decoration for valor, typically awarded to soldiers who displayed extraordinary heroism in combat. Virginia would be the only civilian woman in World War II to receive it. She refused the public ceremony. "I'm still operational and most anxious to get busy," she told the OSS. She requested instead a private ceremony. On September 27, 1945, in General Donovan's office at OSS headquarters, with only her mother present, William Donovan pinned the Distinguished Service Cross on Virginia Hall's uniform. The citation praised her courage and her critical contributions to Allied victory, but mentioned nothing specific. The nature of her work remained classified. Virginia's response to receiving America's highest honor for a woman in World War II combat operations was characteristically understated. Not bad for a girl from Baltimore. Decades later, her niece Lorna Catling would recall, "She always avoided publicity. She would say, 'It was just 6 years of my life.'" Virginia never wrote a memoir. She granted no interviews. She spoke little about her wartime service, even to her family. In one letter she sent home during the war, she mentioned that the Germans had caught some resistance members and hung them on butcher's hooks. "It was a terrifying letter," Catling recalled. The names and faces of those she couldn't save haunted her. Too many of her friends, she once said, were killed because they talked too much. She would not make that mistake. The British made Virginia a member of the Order of the British Empire for her 1941 to 1942 service with SOE. France awarded her the Croix de Guerre with Palm, one of the nation's highest military honors. But official recognition came with bureaucratic frustration. When the OSS was disbanded after the war and the Central Intelligence Agency was formed in 1947, Virginia joined as one of its first female operations officers. She married Paul Goyot in 1950, one of the OSS operatives, who had parachuted into France in 1944 and worked with her network. Together, they served in the CIA, posted to various locations around the world. But Virginia's CIA career never matched the impact or satisfaction of her wartime operations. As CIA historian Randy Burkett later acknowledged, was she treated properly? Well, by today's standards, absolutely not. She was a woman in an organization dominated by men who had never operated behind enemy lines, never commanded resistance fighters, never escaped the Gestapo. They outranked her. They made policy while she was assigned to desk jobs analyzing intelligence reports. As you get higher in rank, it's all about money and personnel and plans and policy and bureaucratic stuff, Burkett said. Virginia had thrived on independence, on operational decisions made in seconds, with lives hanging in the balance. She found the peacetime CIA stifling. She retired in 1966 at age 60, after 15 years with the agency. Most of her colleagues had no idea about her wartime record. It was still classified, and Virginia never spoke of it. She and Paul lived quietly on a farm in Maryland. She raised the American flag every morning and tended her garden. She died on July 8, 1982, at age 76. The Washington Post ran a brief obituary that mentioned her wartime service in general terms, but included no details. The full story remained hidden in classified archives. Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Laon, escaped to South America after the war with help from American intelligence, which used him as an anti-communist asset during the early Cold War. He lived in Bolivia under an assumed name until 1983, when the French government finally extradited him. During his 1987 trial in Lyon for crimes against humanity, the torture and murder of thousands of Jews and resistance fighters. Prosecutors presented evidence of his obsession with catching the Limping Lady. He had devoted enormous resources to finding her, flooding Lyon with agents, torturing captured resistance members for information about her identity and location. He never caught her. He never even learned her real name until decades after the war. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. He died in 1991. Barbie spent his final years in the same city where Virginia had operated under his nose, building networks that helped defeat his Reich. In 1988, 6 years after Virginia's death, the United States Army added her name to the Military Intelligence Corps Hall of Fame. In 2016, the CIA named a building in her honor. The agency's museum displays a mannequin of Virginia dressed as she appeared during her missions, complete with Cuthbert. The exhibit text calls her the most dangerous of all Allied spies. In 2020, the United States Navy commissioned a research vessel named USNS Henson, honoring women who served with distinction. Virginia Hall's name is engraved on the ship's heritage plaque. In 2024, the French government announced plans to name a school after her in Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, where she had operated in 1944. These recognitions came too late for Virginia to see them, but they serve as evidence of what historians now understand. The operational impact of her network saved countless lives and shaped the outcome of critical campaigns. Conservative estimates suggest that the intelligence she transmitted prevented the deaths of hundreds of Allied soldiers by revealing German positions and fortifications. The pilots she helped escape, dozens of them, returned to fly missions that destroyed German military targets. The Morzak prison break she organized freed men who went on to lead resistance networks that tied down thousands of German troops. The resistance fighters she armed and coordinated in 1944 cleared entire regions of German forces, sparing those areas from becoming battlegrounds and saving civilian lives. Today, when a young woman enters the CIA's training program, when a disabled person joins the military, when anyone is told they're not fit for work they know they can do, Virginia Hall's example remains relevant. She faced 3 impossible barriers. She was a woman in an era when military leadership was reserved for men. She had a disability that bureaucrats used to disqualify her from service. And she operated in an environment where a single mistake meant torture and death. She overcame all 3 not by pretending they didn't exist, but by transforming them into operational advantages. Her gender made the Gestapo underestimate her. They couldn't imagine a woman capable of such operational sophistication. Their own prejudices created a blind spot she exploited ruthlessly. When Klaus Barbie's agents interviewed witnesses about suspicious activity in Lyon, they discounted reports of an American woman involved in resistance work because it seemed implausible. One Gestapo report from October 1942, declassified in 1978, noted, multiple sources reference an American female with mobility impairment involved in sheltering British pilots. Assessment: likely a minor contact rather than operational leadership. Priority: low. That low priority assessment allowed Virginia to operate for another month before escaping. Her disability made her memorable, but in ways she could manipulate. By changing her appearance and gait, she could be different people even though everyone knew about the Limping Lady. The Germans were searching for a limping woman, but they expected her to limp the same way always. Virginia studied different gaits. As the elderly milkmaid, she shuffled with the slow steps of age, disguising her prosthetics restriction. As a younger cover identity, she wore full skirts that hid her leg and adopted a rolling walk that suggested hip problems rather than amputation. She once told a fellow agent, according to his memoirs published in 1958, "Cuthbert is my best disguise. They're looking for the limp, so I give them 6 different versions of it. Her American background, which should have made her an obvious foreigner, became part of her cover as a New York Post correspondent. Foreign journalists were expected to have accents, to ask questions, to travel and meet people. Virginia's cover gave her license to do exactly what her mission required, while appearing completely legitimate. When Gestapo agents questioned her in Lyon in early 1942, an encounter she survived by remaining calm and showing her press credentials, they found nothing suspicious about an American reporter interviewing people and filing stories. They let her go. The principles she demonstrated remain timeless. First, persistence in the face of systemic rejection. Virginia didn't accept the State Department's decision that amputation disqualified her from meaningful service. She didn't accept the SOE's initial hesitation about sending a disabled woman to France. She didn't accept the OSS commander's reluctance to give her authority over Maquis leaders. She proved her capability through results, not arguments. Second, creativity in turning weakness into strength. Every supposed limitation, her gender, her disability, her foreign origin, became an operational tool. Modern special operations forces study this principle. Operatives who don't fit the expected profile often have advantages precisely because enemies overlook them. Third, operational security that prioritizes mission over personal recognition. Virginia could have written memoirs that would have made her wealthy and famous. She chose silence to protect the people she'd worked with and the intelligence methods she'd used. When General Donovan offered to arrange speaking engagements after the war, she declined. When publishers approached her with book deals, she refused. "Too many of my friends died because they talked too much," she said. In an era of social media and self-promotion, Virginia's commitment to mission over ego offers a powerful counterexample. Fourth, absolute commitment to the people depending on you. Virginia organized the Mozac prison break not because SOE ordered it, but because she couldn't abandon captured agents. She stayed in Lyon as the Gestapo closed in, completing her mission to the last possible moment, because resistance fighters needed her coordination. She returned to France in 1944, despite the danger because the invasion needed preparation, and she was the only one with the networks to do it. Modern intelligence services study her tradecraft in detail. The CIA's training program includes case studies on how she recruited agents across social boundaries: nuns and brothel owners, police officers and criminals, wealthy merchants and poor farmers. She understood that effective networks cross all social divisions and that ideology matters less than shared purpose. Military strategists analyze her coordination of resistance forces, particularly how she maintained operational security while managing large dispersed networks without modern communications technology. She relied on personal relationships, careful vetting, and compartmentalization, each cell knowing only what it needed to know. Historians debate whether any single agent had greater operational impact on the war effort in France. The question is difficult to answer because so many records were destroyed, and Virginia herself never claimed credit. But the documented evidence is compelling. 37 intelligence reports over 57 days in 1944, 27 supply drops coordinated, 1,500 fighters organized, an entire French department cleared of German forces before Allied troops arrived, and approximately 150 German soldiers killed or captured by operations she directed. Conservative estimates by military historians suggest the intelligence she transmitted prevented the deaths of approximately 300 to 500 Allied soldiers by revealing German positions and fortifications that would otherwise have been costly to discover. The 60 to 70 pilots she personally helped escape during 1941 to 1942 returned to fly missions that destroyed German military targets, each pilot representing dozens of sorties. The 12 SOE agents she freed from Morzak prison in July 1942 went on to lead resistance networks that tied down thousands of German troops and conducted sabotage operations across France. Several became legendary. Georges Béguet continued his work as a wireless operator. Michael Trotobas led the farmer network near Lille until he was killed in a shootout with the Gestapo in 1943. And Jean-Pierre Bloch became a key resistance organizer in southern France. Every bridge Virginia's networks destroyed in summer 1944 delayed German reinforcements by hours or days. The Pont de Chamalières demolition alone forced an estimated 2,000 German troops to detour, arriving too late to reinforce defensive positions that American forces had already overrun. Multiplied across dozens of operations, these tactical delays contributed to the rapid Allied advance through France in August and September 1944, which military historians credit with saving thousands of Allied lives and shortening the war in Western Europe by approximately 3 months. In June 1944, Germany had 1.4 million troops in France. By October 1944, fewer than 400,000 remained combat effective. Resistance operations, coordinated by agents like Virginia, accounted for an estimated 5 to 7% of German casualties during this period. Roughly 25,000 soldiers killed, wounded, or captured, and destroyed approximately $75 million worth of German military equipment and infrastructure. The barn in Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, where Virginia transmitted her intelligence report, still stands, now marked with a historical plaque that reads, "From this location in summer 1944, Virginia Hall coordinated resistance operations that helped liberate the Haute-Loire Department." The Pyrenees Pass she crossed in winter has become a hiking trail, though few who walk it in summer can imagine making the journey in snow with a prosthetic leg. Experienced mountaineers who attempt the route in winter conditions report that the 50-mile, 7,500-foot crossing takes at least 3 days with modern equipment and proper boots. Virginia did it in November 1942 with a wooden leg that dug into her stump with every step, turning it to a bloody mess, while German and French police searched for her in the valleys below. The National Archives in Britain and the United States hold her personnel files, finally declassified decades after her death, revealing the full scope of operations that were once among the war's most closely guarded secrets. File HS 9/647/4 at the UK National Archives contains her SOE personnel record, including training reports, mission briefings, decoded radio transmissions, and her own after-action report on the Pyrenees escape. The report is characteristically understated, noting simply, "Crossing accomplished despite difficult conditions. Cuthbert problematic, but manageable." Her OSS file in the United States National Archives includes commendation letters from multiple commanders, intelligence reports she transmitted, and photographs taken in Le Chambon-sur-Lignon in August 1944, showing her with Paul Guyot and other OSS operatives. In one photograph, Virginia stands outside the barn that served as her headquarters, wearing peasant clothes, her grey hair visible, looking every bit the elderly milkmaid she portrayed. Only the radio equipment visible in the background and the confidence in her stance suggest her true identity. The original Cuthbert, the 7-pound wooden leg that carried her across mountains and through occupied France, was lost to history, perhaps destroyed, perhaps kept by Virginia until her death and disposed of by her family, who didn't understand its significance. But its legend endures. In 2019, when the CIA commissioned a statue of Virginia Hall for its headquarters, the sculptor spent months researching period prosthetics to accurately recreate Cuthbert. The statue shows Virginia in her wartime clothing, radio equipment slung over her shoulder, Cuthbert clearly visible below her left knee. The plaque beneath reads, Virginia Hall, 1906 to 1982, the Limping Lady, the most dangerous of all Allied spies. In 2021, the United States Navy announced that a new class of research vessels would be named after women who served with distinction in military and intelligence operations. The USNS Virginia Hall was commissioned in 2023. At the ceremony, Admiral William Lesher said, Virginia Hall proved that the most dangerous weapon in any conflict isn't technology or firepower. It's the human capacity to refuse defeat. She was told she couldn't serve, so she served with such distinction that enemies who never learned her name still speak of her with respect. When the ship's crew learned about Virginia's story, they adopted an unofficial motto, Cuthbert's Revenge. What's not debatable, what the historical record proves beyond question, is that Virginia Hall proved wrong every expert who said a woman with a wooden leg couldn't survive behind enemy lines in occupied France. She didn't just survive. She became the one person Klaus Barbie and the entire Gestapo apparatus couldn't catch despite desperate efforts spanning 15 months and involving 500 agents. Return now to December 8, 1933, to that hillside in Smyrna where Virginia's shotgun discharged and destroyed her leg. If you had told her then that this accident would lead to her becoming the most wanted Allied spy in Europe, she would have thought you mad. If you had told her she would command 1,500 resistance fighters, organize prison breaks, and transmit intelligence that would help win the largest war in human history, all while standing on a wooden leg, she would have considered it impossible. But Virginia Hall had been raised to believe that impossible meant not yet accomplished, rather than cannot be done. When the State Department rejected her because of her disability, she didn't accept their judgment as final. When the SOE hesitated to send a woman to France, she proved them wrong. When the Germans flooded Lyon with agents hunting for her, she stayed until her mission was complete, then escaped through mountains that would defeat most able-bodied mountaineers. When the OSS commanders wouldn't give her proper authority, she found ways to lead anyway. When Maquis fighters doubted that a woman could command them, she let her results speak. Every wireless transmission she sent, every pilot she saved, every bridge her networks destroyed, every German soldier her forces killed or captured, she accomplished while standing on Cuthbert. That wooden leg, the State Department said, made her unfit for service. In September 1944, when American troops advanced through the Haute-Loire and found French towns already liberated by resistance forces, when they asked who had organized and armed these fighters, the answer seemed impossible. An American woman with a wooden leg who had been living as a milkmaid. But impossible was never the right word for Virginia Hall. The word is inevitable. When you combine brilliant intelligence with absolute determination, when you add operational creativity to strategic vision, when you refuse to accept that barriers are permanent, when you care more about mission than recognition, when you're willing to walk across mountains on a wooden leg because people are depending on you, the outcome is inevitable. Virginia Hall was inevitable. The Gestapo could never catch her because they were searching for someone who fit their expectations. Virginia fit no one's expectations. That was her greatest advantage. The impossible became possible because one woman with a wooden leg refused to accept that she couldn't do it. She transformed every reason she should have failed into the reason she succeeded. And in doing so, she helped free France, defeat Nazi Germany, and prove that the most dangerous weapon in any war isn't tanks or bombers or secret technologies. It's a person who refuses to quit when everyone says they should. The limping lady they mocked became the legend they feared. Cuthbert, the wooden leg that was supposed to end her dreams, carried her to victory. And somewhere in that barn in Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, in the mountains of the Pyrenees, in the streets of Lyon, where she walked for 15 months, under German surveillance and never got caught. Somewhere in those places, you can still feel the presence of the most dangerous spy the world has ever known. A woman who proved that being told you can't is just the universe's way of asking how badly you want it.